Over the many problems in the country, Numsa's Irvin Jim has now penned a piece talking about the transport sector, the inefficiencies within the systems itself, from road to rail to air travel, as well as the lack of organized labor presence in some parts of the industry, and how all of that now needs to be overhauled. Let's talk more about that opinion piece and bring in Irvin Jim, the General Secretary of Numsa. Very good evening to you, sir. I'm grateful for your time. You say that local transport, or the local transport system, is in crisis. Explain how so.
Well, first, we are in a conference which was taking stock of the state of urban transport and rail and road networks. And we're very clear that the extent which austerity measures have affected negatively the transport sector and urban transport workers is very huge. We got a state of collapse, and as a result of austerity measures, the last time urban transport was prioritized was when in the early 2000s there was taxi recapitalization. We now know that a huge percentage of our community, in particular in the township, is dependent on taxi association, who have been crying about government to subsidize them, and that has not been happening. And indeed, then all the benefits and conditions of bus passenger workers have been eroded. We have a situation where bus workers, for instance, they get paid this month. They are not sure if they will be paid next month because of austerity measures around PRASA. So it is a week where workers all over the world assemble in South Africa to reflect. We, quite frankly, we are not alone. All the challenges that we are confronted with here as a result of neoliberal policies, austerity measures, affect all workers in the continent and in the world. And as unions, we have been reflecting as to how do we deal with this. And we're very clear that we need to embark on rolling mobilization to push the state to basically intervene in the economy, to go back to expansionary budget, and to ensure that these critical services, which are a public good, must remain in the hands of the state. And we need safe public transport, and it's campaigns that we would have to wage globally as the working class.
On the issue of the transport industry, the taxi industry in particular, and the recapitalization program, so that happened about 20 years ago. The issue of a subsidy for the taxi industry, which is the only mode of public transport in this country that is not subsidized by government in some way. When Fikile Mbalula was transport minister, like those before him, he made all the right noises about moving in that direction. He's now left that portfolio. Do you think we'll see a further pulling back, if you will, from that commitment to indeed formalize the sector and ultimately make sure it is subsidized?
The deepening crisis in our country is not going to be helped and assisted by changing individual and changing faces. It's going to demand that all progressive forces in the country must speak in one voice in pushing for a state that is driving a revolutionary agenda. And that revolutionary agenda is about going back to basic, in our view, taking ownership and control of the commanding heights of the economy, our country's mineral, drive manufacturing and industrialization to create the most needed job, have a state that intervenes in the economy, that stimulates economic development, that a state that is prepared to basically spend money in infrastructure, a state that is prepared to put together a stimulus package around infrastructure to stimulate economic growth, to create the necessary jobs that we want. The crisis we were debating this week around transport is the tip of an iceberg, is the same crisis that we are confronted with in healthcare. The fact that we had a public sector strike this week, which is not resolved, and we know that hospital services have basically collapsed, and those workers of Nehau are expected to make miracles and carry this burden and to pay for the crisis. We know that an agreement which was signed with them for 3 years The state unilaterally in 2021 simply decided to unilaterally withdraw 7%, which belongs to workers. And we're saying, no, workers should not pay for this crisis. And it is austerity measures are not going to solve the crisis that confronts South Africa.
But in solving the crisis, you as organized labor face two issues, right? You've got a younger workforce that's less interested in being part of organized labor than was the reality in South Africa 20, 30, 40 years ago. You've also got an issue where, apart from declining membership for organized labor, people are so desperate to find work that they will take any contract for work that's available, regardless of how poor the conditions, the terms of that contract are. So how do we get around those two issues?
Just like I'm arguing that it's time to go back to a revolutionary agenda, there are no shortcuts to or short-term solution to this problem. The more youth wage subsidies schemes that are being created that are not a solution, the more those workers over time, over 3 years, you can run away from trade unions because you think that they have been too much and you do not experience the gains. But within no time, you realize that black men, you are on your own. You need to go back to the traditions and to organize, to unite. There is no replacement for our community's solidarity and solidarity between workers. There's no replacement for promoting worker-to-worker conduct and union-to-union conduct, and to go back to the basics of fighting for a liberation vision, which was dumped, unfortunately, by the ANC when it adopted GEAR and pursued this neoliberal agenda. There is no replacement for a state that intervenes in the economy. The reason why China continues to be a booming economy that has squashed inequalities is because it has got a state that is intervening in the economy on behalf of its own people.
But of course, we could talk about this further. The issue with difference with China and South Africa is because we've got such different takes on economic policy as a whole. But for now, thank you very much, Irvin Jim, for speaking to us, Numsa's General Secretary, talking to us tonight about problems in the transport sector and the role that organized labor can play in all of that.